Hey guys, so there's a lot of suggestions out there that Bitcoin has failed. I think these are wrong because it's too early to judge whether Bitcoin has succeeded or not. Bitcoin has not reached its final form, if you will. So let's go into the screen share and just thought I'd show you one article which is sort of relevant in this case. So this one was published 3 days ago, and basically the point of the argument by Joe Nocera is that he believes Bitcoin has failed. And so why does he believe it's failed? So as you can see here, he is talking about how DigiCash went bankrupt. He's also mentioning how there was a short-lived era where people were trading online with Napster and so on, but then e-commerce came in and people were using PayPal instead. But ultimately, when it comes to using Bitcoin as a money, he mentions here how, oh, well, who's going to use Bitcoin if it's going up by $500 in 10 minutes or if it's going down by $500 in 10 minutes? So he's saying that Bitcoin has just become a speculative asset and there's no way to predict what it will be worth, and that's the fatal reason it's flawed. And that, we're basically going to have to wait for an electronic currency that works. So what are the problems here? I think the first one is not looking at it from a point of view of sound money, and two, looking at Bitcoin now as though it should just be everything it needs to be already. And that may not be his explicit thought process. I think it's just an underlying point of view that people might have when they're looking at Bitcoin. So it's almost like they're imposing an impossibly high standard that no currency could ever meet, because this is a totally like open source code that nobody has, there's no government or bank coming out and saying, yes, this is the money of the world. It's going to have to evolve through a process. It's not just an end state. You've got to view this like it's the market process, determining which thing is the best thing to store value in. And that's going to become, that by necessity has to be a process. And as part of that process, yeah, it's going to start off more speculative, then it will become eventually a store of value, and then a unit of account, and then, then a medium of exchange, and then a unit of account. But we don't know exactly where those levels are, and it might not be easy to pinpoint exactly, okay, now is the point where it's a generally viewed and accepted store of value. I don't think it's there yet. I mean, I think amongst Bitcoiners, it can be seen as a store of value, but amongst the broader world, we're still very, very early. And in order for it to become a widely accepted store of value, what do you think has to happen to the value? Right? It has to be much, much higher than what it is now. So, if anything, we can't say that it's going to be, quote unquote stable value anytime soon. It might be years from now, it could be a decade from now. We don't know. It might be at 100,000 or it might be at 1 million when people start actually using it more for a commerce point of view. So I think part of this is you have to appreciate that people can't necessarily hodl forever. Yeah, like at some point you've got to spend on food and rent or buy a property, or those other living expenses. So this for now is just going to be a little more on the speculative side, but I believe it's a speculation that is sort of a smart speculation. I think it's a clever risk to take, and the reason for that, well, you've really just got to zoom out on that chart and view that. So here is Bitcoin charts. It's Bitstamp, one of the longest surviving Bitcoin exchanges. This data goes back to around late 2011. Bitcoin has been around since 2009, and so as you can see, the value back then was what, $5? And as I make this video today, the value is in the $11,000 range, US. So I don't know how you could say that an asset that has returned 400, 500% compound annual return is a failure. I mean, if that's what failure looks like to you, I would love to see what your definition of success is, right? So I think the other thing to appreciate is that in terms of the comment here about an electronic currency that works, I think you've got to appreciate here that while in the early days, Bitcoin may well have been fine to do on-chain transactions for low value. Now, that's not necessarily the case. And the way it's going to work now is more like Bitcoin is the settlement layer. So large value transactions, high power money. Think of it as, large value transactions, high power money. And if the average transaction today is around $87,000 in US dollars, and the transaction fee is $12, well, that's fine. That's not a big deal, right? People who are transferring that kind of money and who want to have certainty and who want to be able to send it at any time, even on the weekends, they're more than happy to pay $12 for a transaction. And even those transactions right now, those are probably a little bit on the high end because of some of the network congestion and so on that there is currently. So if you're more interested in the small value transactions and how, Bitcoin has not reached its final form, I think you should look into the Lightning Network, which is one of the really cool innovations that you just have to pay attention to if you're looking at the Bitcoin world. You've got to look at this because basically what it does is it enables people to set up payment channels between each other using a Lightning node or setting up a Lightning node and then settling the net balance of those transactions as opposed to doing every single transaction on the Bitcoin blockchain and paying that $12, for example's sake, transaction fee. So this dramatically lowers the fees. And just as an example, now this is all still in test, but I'll just show you an example of what's going on. So this is an example of Jack Mallers, who's one of the Lightning Network wallet. He's developing a wallet called Zap. And he's making a payment here on the Blockstream website. And here he's gone pay with Lightning. It opens up the Zap wallet and done. That's really what this could look like in the future. So I think you've got to have a little bit of an imagination and a little bit more long-term view, and you've got to think of it more like a sound money. And if you don't do that, I think you're committing analytical errors. So hopefully that helps explain to you why Bitcoin has not reached its final form. Thanks, guys.